so many people think about like causes to get involved in that feel like huge causes that are like at a scale that it feels like you can't do something. And there's so much discourse right now. There's a lot of people creating content about a lot of the things that we're interested in, whether it be transit or urbanism type content creators and whatnot. And there's a lot of people getting interested in it. And there's kind of been this debate happening over the last like month online that I've noticed personally, at least, over like, yeah, it's great that all these people are paying a little bit more attention now to this, but how can folks get more involved in doing something? And like personally, in doing this podcast, I've learned a lot more about all these different organizations here and met a lot of great folks in Austin like yourself who are involved in them. But like what sort of things do you think that people can do, whether they're here in Austin or in their communities around the country, to get more involved specifically in causes like transit and bike infrastructure and all of these sorts of different things?
Yeah, well, I think a seed of what you're saying that I think is super important is just how much more, okay, and I'll put my bias on the table here as someone who does not aspire to state or federal office. Like,
This is Adam Powell. He is running for city council here in Austin, Texas.
for me, those types of, that scale of systems is really tough for me to feel like I can make a difference in at a statewide or federal level.
Totally.
But if you want to start locally, I mean, I always tell people, like, start literally where you live. So that can be like your commute, that can be the school system near you, that can be really any legitimate, anything that affects your life, and find something that you think should be better. Start knocking doors and find ways to make it better.
Right.
Now that's very simple to say. What I think that really translates into is, no matter where you are in the country, no matter where you are in Austin, you're going to be able to find something you can make an impact on. And when you take it at that granular level,
Right.
it could just be a sidewalk, it could be something with the school, it could be a bike lane, it could be anything.
Right.
You're going to find a way to make an impact, and an impact that's going to be more fulfilling than probably a lot of the typical conversations you'll see on social media.
Totally.
So for me personally, I mean, I had a moment in middle of the pandemic where I was like relatively involved in the community, doing things I was proud of, but I was like, I want to do more right where I live. And in my case, my neighborhood has an awesome neighborhood association. That is not the case for every neighborhood.
No, right.
We're ones that really focus in on the events and the community building. And I was able to slot in, be vice president of that organization for a couple of years. But for other people, I mean, that could be the Friends of the Neighborhood Association.
Right.
That could be other local advocacy groups. It could be
Totally.
some niche committee that people don't know exists, but really makes a huge impact. And I think it's just one of those, trust your gut, find a space that you feel like you're being heard and valued and that you can make a difference in, and do it.
Right.
But just starting super local.
Right.
Your street, and the street next to it, and the street next to it.
And I think like Kelsey, who we talked with on a previous episode, is such a great example of that. Like hearing her journey of
She
like
had an issue right in front of her.
right.
Yeah.
She recorded a TikTok basically, and like it all spiraled from there. And she's gotten so involved in so many different things. So it might seem daunting, but it can be something as simple as like downloading the 311 app for your city. That can be a first step. Is like you can go and report these things. It can be. I mean, you've probably got some experience of like. Trying to get in front of your city hall. I mean, that can, or your city council. Like, I know you've definitely spoken in front of city council on more than one occasion, I'm sure. But like, those processes can seem daunting, but they don't have to be necessarily if you can focus on the granular thing, like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Kelsey's example is perfect. And I'll say, Kelsey's the homie.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just be heaping praise every time that name comes up because she's a great friend of mine and just an absolutely amazing organizer. And I tell her that all the time. I say, you're an amazing organizer. You make more of a difference in the Austin community than basically anyone, right? And she's like, no, I'm not. And it,
Very, very humble.
it's humble, and it also shows that like what she's doing at the end of the day is just connecting with friends, connecting with neighbors, connecting with people who care about it. Something anyone could do. And the cool thing too is like she, her success story with Barton Skyway is the social media push, right?
Totally.
I see that happen in so many different spaces in Austin. So right now we're close to Shoal Creek, and Shoal Creek got bike lanes a few years back, and have continued to see improvements there. And the strip of Shoal Creek that goes near my house, there was a lot of resistance to having bike lanes, but turns out it was really a vocal minority of some people who were like, we don't really want to change the road, we're used to it. I get where they're coming from. But there was a larger group of people in that neighborhood that really wanted those protected bike lanes. And a lot of that came down to one woman who's named Diana. I won't say her last name because I didn't tell her I was talking about her on the podcast. Her name's Diana. She's amazing. And she really spearheaded that, knocked a bunch of doors, handed out flyers, got people to sign petitions. And once that bike lane went in, me and my wife we bought bikes for the first time in our adulthood. We had never had bikes in our adulthood, and then we're like, oh my God, we have this right here. We can bike to get coffee, we can bike to get groceries. Gigantic impact.
I rode on it today.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and I like the idea of that bike path too, because that also just transcends just that neighborhood. I mean, that is a vital link now for multiple communities, not just the community that it went through. I am new to the cult of the e-bike that Lewis has roped me into. But
one day I will join it. It's not happened yet. It's gonna happen.
It doesn't take much.
It doesn't. Yeah.
That's what I'm terrified of.
But now I frequently use that bike lane, whether it's to bike from my house to the gym or if I'm biking from my house to meet Lewis. But Shoal Creek is a main thoroughfare for me now, way more than it ever was when I was driving a car most of the trips. So yeah, the impact of just having that is so huge to people even outside of that neighborhood.
Totally.
And to tie it on that too, it's like if Diana hadn't stepped up to the plate like that, one person, right? And she brought community together. But I legitimately believe if she didn't put her hat in that fight, then that's thousands and thousands of people who wouldn't have that amazing amenity, this amazing public resource, this amazing mode of transit that wouldn't have existed if she didn't do that.
Totally.
So if you don't think you can make an impact, you absolutely can.
Go ahead. You're good.
Well, no, I was just going to ask, so in the process of you sort of getting started and being more involved in your community, what kind of like challenges or have you hit any roadblocks along the way, and how did you sort of overcome those?
The biggest challenge I would say is kind of turns into two things that are heavily related. One is a lot of these spaces that you get involved in are really, really boring. And I'm just going to be straightforward about it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's a 2-hour committee meeting that like 5 people show up to.
There's a reason they're not selling tickets for the city council meeting.
Exactly. And especially when it's a committee that impacts a committee that impacts a committee, it can feel really far down the line. So the impact will result in thousands of people, but it could be 2 hours of like a pretty not exciting meeting. So one is it's boring. Two is it can be really hard to find this information. I've noticed just like the nature of information in local politics is like so many people in the community, and I'll say in this beautiful community in North Austin, people care. People go out and vote. They care about what happens in their local politics. And it's hard to stay in the loop in local politics the same way that you can with state and federal and just checking social media, right? So it's oftentimes in local politics, the first thing that you hear is the thing you latch onto the most and might not be completely representative of the situation. So there is like a level of you have to power map and find which spaces are the ones really making that impact. Or as often happens, none of them are making that impact and it's time for you to create something or bring some people together for it. But if you get past, again, like these spaces can be super boring, but I also strongly believe in the correlation of the more boring it is, probably the more impactful it is. And also you do have to take some time, dig in or network and find people who know about these spaces in the first place.
Yeah, and I think this was what I was going to bring up a second ago. It's fine, I think, to start these conversations online, but I found it so interesting the amount of people that I've kind of interacted with on like Austin Twitter in the last.
Well, we connected on Twitter.
Exactly. That was going to be one of the examples. Is I saw that you were running for city council in my district, and I had seen you like be involved with Rethink 35, and I'd seen some of the history TikTok stuff. So I think I replied something on there being like, interesting, in my district. And like you were like, oh, like if you want to get coffee at some point, like let's do it. We went.
Have you slide into the DMs?
Yeah.
When you run for local office, you're sliding into a lot of DMs.
But that's the exact same way that I met Kelsey. So I had seen Kelsey on Twitter. I ran into her once at a city council meeting and just like quickly said hi awkwardly. I was like, this is weird, but like I follow you on Twitter. And she's like, oh, and Kelsey, she's like super friendly and everything. So she said hi and we chatted for a little bit. But
super humble despite her low-key celebrity
status. Yeah. But I met up with her for coffee at a certain point too. And it was just like, there are a lot of people who are very likely going to care about the same things that you care about. And it's a great first step to try to find those people online. It's an even better second step to like try to get some of these things accomplished together. It's like, okay, maybe not everyone has the time to go sit at that 2-hour meeting, but if you can meet some of these other people in person, somebody might, and at least somebody who can represent your voice can bring a petition, can talk about what the people that you know care about with this. It can make like such a big impact, and you can also make a lot of friends along the way. That was so wholesome. Oh my God.
So many friends, right?
Well, we're going to jump right back into everything in a second here, but if you have not liked this video, please consider doing so. If you haven't left a comment, please do so. It also helps us out in the algorithm, and we actually read them all. We want to see your feedback. Do that. If you're not subscribed, consider doing that as well.
And the ratings are not just for YouTube. Make sure that you're going to your favorite podcast platform, giving us a good rating, giving us a comment, and don't forget to share this with all of your friends.
And when you come into a committee, or for instance, I mentioned the neighbor association earlier. The first Zoom meeting I went on, because it's like middle of 2020, pandemic era.
Right.
There were 3 other people on that Zoom meeting, and that turned into we have July 4th events where we have hundreds of neighbors coming through, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
But when you're that person and there are 3 other people and they've been doing it for maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 years, you stand out so much in a really, really positive way. Not every space will embrace that, but every space will recognize, whoa, this person's coming in, they have some new ideas, and they're passionate about it. If you're passionate enough to find the space in the first place, you can make an impact there.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. That's very good.
Should we pivot to some Austin transit related stuff here? Yeah, I guess as right now, obviously the city of Austin is going through a lot of changes.
A lot of
as
growth,
far as
a lot of
transit,
changes.
Whether it be the current plan from TxDOT for the for the 35 expansion, whether it be Project Connect, all of the lawsuits involved with both of those things.
Restart Lone Star Rail District. There's so many movements happening at one time.
Shout out Clay with Restart Lone Star Rail District.
Yeah,
he's doing amazing work.
We've been texting back and forth. We're hoping to get him on at some point for future.
I'll bother
episodes.
him for you if you
So
need.
if you're not
Let
subscribed
me
already,
know.
you can go ahead and subscribe so you can see that one in the future.
That's right. Clay's awesome.
There you go. I guess as you kind of see all of these projects, like what is the like hopeful vision for transit in Austin down the line that like you hope to see? I mean, you're obviously running for office, so you might have a say in some of this stuff down the line too. So what is the vision that you're hoping for as all of these projects kind of come to a head? I know it's a huge question, but
no, I love it. I love it. Oh, I think it spans the entire spectrum, right? So on the generational level, right? When I'm thinking my kids, when I'm thinking my grandkids, who will grow up recognizing that Austin is the best city in the world, like I did, being born here, growing up in the area. I want them to be able to live in the city without a car. Full stop. Anywhere in the city without a car, specifically North Austin, of course, but anywhere. So when I think about the real long term, I think about like Project Connect. Ideally, should just be us dipping our toes in the water of building a true rail system throughout the city, and scaffolding that with the rapid bus lines, the infrastructure investments we need to be able to do that continuously.
Right.
It's something I talk about here in District 7 in North Austin. We have the Red Line. We have a few Red Line stops. But in a few ways, the current Project Connect plan doesn't actually connect to the Red Line the way that we were kind of hoping it would be.
Right.
Does it, and correct me, does it make it to District 7 at all yet? Because it stops
So-
at like 38th, right?
There are some rapid bus lines and
Right.
things that are like additional pieces,
Yeah.
but the light rail itself, no.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Not until the priority extensions or whatever.
Yeah,
whenever
exactly.
we get there. Yeah.
And for me personally, I mean, yeah, of course that's disappointing as someone who lives up here, but I still completely support Project Connect. I always have, always will, because trains beget more trains.
Right.
If we don't start mobilizing the workforce, if we don't start funding this, it's not gonna get any easier.
Right. It's you got to build build what we can when we can, and it will make the extensions easier to do down the line because at least the initial investment is there.
And if we don't start building now, it's never going to be cheaper than right now.
Absolutely
Yeah.
never.
Yeah.
I look back at quick history detour here.
Yeah.
The 2000 rail vote is just such an amazing sign of the times in terms of how different things are. That was a rail vote that, for one, was heavily, let's say, encouraged by the Texas legislature. So now we're in a situation where Project Connect is being attacked by the Texas state legislature. Again, I don't like to dig into state politics if I can avoid it, but I'm here in defense of light rail no matter what. Back then in 2000, there were circumstances at Cap Metra that led them to say, hey, you've been talking about building this light rail, put it on the ballot, make it happen. Totally opposite political context. And that was in the hundreds of millions. I'm not going to say an exact figure, something around like 400 or 500 million for something that's more expensive than what we're going to get built for a few billion.
And
right?
I mean, we would have it now too.
Right. We would have it right now. And that vote only failed by like a few hundred votes.
Oh.
It was one of the biggest what ifs in Austin history. We can go back further. Austin had a streetcar system from 1875 until 1940 when it was phased out in favor of bus lines, and it was all private the entire time.
Right.
And that's one of those where I'm like, if we still had that, if we had that precedent,
Yeah.
where would we be right now? And we don't need to imagine it when we look at so many cities who did keep those streetcar lines.
Totally. That's the same thing we saw in our last episode of the Salt Lake City. This
Exactly.
might not be the episode right away, but a couple back. Same story there. Yeah.
Well, I love the historic photos of the train depots, right? Because Austin had postcards of these train depots for, the Air National Great Northern Railway and the others that I'm messing up the names of right now. They had rail depots that were on postcards and were landmarks, and they don't exist anymore.
Yep.
So those rail lines don't exist.
I think one of the last ones that exists is the old Carmelo's restaurant that's about to be redeveloped. But there's the old historic station right there on like 4th Street in downtown or 5th Street. It's like one of the last pieces of old rail architecture that's left.
And there are even some points in Austin where you can see where the streetcar rails were, and some of them still sticking up. I'm just like, what if? But we can talk about what ifs all day. Yes, it's a bummer we're doing it now and that we didn't take those different paths that would have been a lot easier, but we got to do it. Again, for our kids, for our grandkids, for future generations. And honestly, I'll go to the micro level and it reminds me about housing in a weird way, right? If housing takes a long time to build, what do we do in the meantime? What are the stopgap measures? The stopgap measures are the things that y'all talk about, the cult of the e-bike.
Right.
I remember the first episode, y'all kind of went through each mode of transit and kind of like ride share and scooters and all these different things. And basically, like, those are the micro adjustments we need to make now at scale so we can death by 1,000 cuts this sort of situation.
Right.
No Taylor Swift. That's a great song. We need to go like sidewalk by sidewalk, bike lane by bike lane, take the type of attention that the Kelseys and the Dianas of the world are paying attention to of this super important local infrastructure. Totally. And so for me, and my platform, people are like, what's your grand vision about transit? And also I'm like, well, I mean, there's the longer term stuff, and that's the big, complex mega projects. But when it comes down to sidewalks, bike lanes, scooters, ride share, it is, I don't have a secret. It is putting the work in, paying attention to every single instance.
Totally.
Yeah. The grand vision's great, but look at the 5 feet in front of you.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say I've been like pretty optimistic of like, I think some of those smaller pieces, for the most part, are happening. There's always more that could be done. I always want it to be done faster. Like, Chris is generally more optimistic than I am. I'm a little bit of like I'm always like, oh, I want it, like, this project's gonna take way too long. I want to see it done tomorrow. Like, these bike lanes need to be built today, whatever. But like, even I've been in Austin for about 2.5 years, and even in that time frame, I have seen so many positive changes, specifically on the biking
been great
front.
progress.
It's really, like, I think of North Loop, which is really close to where I live. Like, there's new bike lane improvements over there. Excited about future trails and stuff that are being planned, and all sorts of different stuff. So and even sidewalks. I mean, like, the sidewalks here are hilariously, like, that was like one of the first things I noticed when I moved here. I was like, the sidewalks here are ridiculously bad. In so
we
many
need to do an
places,
entire
like,
episode just on like
Austin
sidewalks.
sidewalks. Oh, we totally could. There's so
I think
much.
y'all would have so much room on that. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
the amount of sidewalks to nowhere that just disappear
Yeah.
or are right next to a roadway with 60-mile-per-hour cars. But exactly to your point, things are getting better. And I think I'll also say I'm totally an optimist. And I'm also somebody who assumes the best about folks, right? So, like, does our city have a lot of things to improve on? Absolutely.
Right.
But I also know there are tons of talented staff members there who know the correct answer of great sidewalks and great bike lanes and safe roads in terms of making sure that everybody inside or outside of a car is protected.
Yeah.
A lot of it to me, and really what I want to do in office, is put political will behind that.
Right.
Say we know the correct answer, our communities know the correct answer. The people who ride their bikes and take the bus every single day know the correct answer. And if we pay enough attention to see that through to completion, bit by bit, we're going to get there.
Totally. Question on buses. I mean, I don't use the bus to commute at all, but I do ride the bus. I use the bus if I'm, usually it'll be like to go out downtown or something, don't want to worry about parking, going to a concert, something like that. If I'm not biking, I'll take the bus. My partner used to commute by bus. Since getting an e-bike, he has not, and a big push for yes, thank you. A big reason though for the switch to the e-bike was the bus, while it can be reliable, and when it's reliable, it's great. When it's not, it's just not, and it's really hard. Fortunately for him, it's not like he has to be in at his job at a certain time. There's some leeway. If you have a job that starts at a certain time, you need to set aside so much more time to be able to get there so that you will be there on time on the bus. And that's like an extra step that you have to take that you would hope folks don't need to. Are there things that you can think of in Austin that we can do while a Project Connect is, we're hoping for that to happen in the long term, things we can do in the short term to kind of improve the system that we have while this bigger vision is taking place, specifically when it goes to buses, I think?
Yeah, so buses, I'm going to pull out the aircraft carrier versus kayak. Have you all heard that phrase before?
I actually have not.
No, I don't
So
think
this
so.
is a phrase I learned working in state government that you really have to internalize when you work in state government is, turning a kayak is as easy as, put the oar in, you're turned.
Right.
You're completely turned around if you do it real quickly. An aircraft carrier is a whole operation. It's a giant, slow, massive turn with a lot of different things that can go wrong the entire way because an aircraft carrier is gigantic. Unfortunately, the bus system, I think, is mostly an aircraft carrier. And the reason being is that Cap Metro is really constrained in terms of their funding, in terms of, I alluded to it a bit earlier, but the political climate. As much as I would love to say that, we could do a whole revamp of bus routes and find ways to make it more efficient, get them running every 5 minutes, that is not really the world we live in. That said, there's not nothing that we can do, right? So from the city council perspective, there are multiple city council members each year who are board members of Cap Metro. Cap Metro, a few times a year, goes through service standards change, where they get a lot of community input. I say a lot, they're always looking for more, and there's a lot of ways that you can get involved in that process to basically say, hey, what are we doing right on this bus route? What are we doing right on this bus route? Can we move it to be next to an HEB instead of a gas station? Right?
Yeah.
The little tweaks that make a giant difference to folks like your partner who are commuting every day on it, and everyone at large. So the big thing that I encourage folks to do with the bus system is just start digging in with Cap Metro itself, right? And I'm very clear about that locus of control because City Council, Cap Metro, separate entities, but a lot of overlap. When the service standards change process comes in, they look for a lot of public feedback, and the more that we can give them from people who are really digging in, riding the bus every day, the better. And then I think a lot of it too does circle back to the long term. And I know in the question it's like, hey, while we're doing the long term, but nothing has given more of an injection of funding and attention and exciting future prospects to the bus system than Project Connected.
No, I totally agree too, especially in the sense of like, but when buses are just like in mixed traffic and whatnot, like some of it is totally out of. You could have the buses running every 5 minutes, but if there's traffic, there's traffic. And, but the most positive experiences I generally have on the bus are on those rapid routes. The 801, the 803 are the more reliable of the buses, and with I think next year in Project Connect, we get at least one more of the rapid routes, and I'm sure that will be a benefit to the people in the communities that goes through. So
it's important to note that those new rapid routes and the new bus infrastructure is something that couldn't have happened without those voter dollars.
Totally.
So Project Connect is like everybody focuses on the rail. I focus on the rail. I'm not I couldn't be more excited than anything.
Right.
Any other part of that, but. The bus improvements, the anti-displacement, and then we're
Knew that was gonna run away.
the anti-displacement funds for housing. Like there's a whole lot within that very massive package.
For sure.
So I think kind of a theme of the answers that you're giving is community investment is so important to this transit advocacy, to recognizing these sort of large-scale plans. When you're elected to city council,
Thank you.
what are your plans, or what are you going to do to encourage that community investment to help get the public will, but also the political will behind improving the systems that we have?
Well, for me, I mean, it all goes back to organizing. So obviously in the campaign, I'll be knocking thousands of doors, talking to voters, getting examples like I think of, a neighbor in Crestview named Norman rides the bike with his kid to school every day. It's amazing. I love that. An option I wish I had growing up. And he's like, hey, on Ryan Drive, at the part that it crosses the railroad, you got to watch out for this specific thing. And it's the type of information that no matter how much my ear's to the ground in an office at city council, I'm never going to get. So the block walking happens during the campaign, and I think it happens while I'm in office as well. Talking to the folks who live in the area, who use the area to find, hey, what am I missing? Because I know I won't know everything, but I know that I can talk to as many people as possible and get the best information. So that's the big push there. And then once we identify the problems, bringing folks to the table, however we have to, and as quickly as we can. And that gets weird. The county factors in. Counties are, the commissioners there, the electeds there, and the folks who work there are great partners. A bit of a spicier situation is like TxDOT right-of-ways, things that are under state government control. As we've mentioned, I'm somebody who has protested TxDOT quite a bit, but I will absolutely come to the table with them if it means we can make a Strode a little bit more traffic calmed or add better assets for pedestrians and folks on bikes. So really it's just humbling myself, accepting that I don't know everything, listening to folks, and putting political will behind it.
Yeah, and
Secret is there's no secret.
yeah,
That's always
Yeah.
my mantra.
I think getting the public will and the political will behind things is so difficult. We're seeing that now with the home initiative. There's a lot of pushback against the home initiative for some valid reasons. You know, as I've learned more about the opposition, I definitely understand their reasoning for being against the home initiative. For a successful public transit system, we really have to focus on sort of public transit-oriented development, and I think that is going to be a tough pill for some communities to swallow. That hey, we've got to densify around these transit lines. We've got to open up zoning a little bit more. I'm just curious, kind of a quick answer, like where you sort of stand on pushing those policies for the city of Austin.
I mean, I think you said it exactly. The transit-oriented development. I love the way Austin's dug in more recently with the equitable transit-oriented development, because equity and the environmental outcomes is the end game for me.
Right.
Like I said earlier, I want my kids and grandkids to not have to have a car in any area of Austin if they don't want to.
Yeah.
To me, that's also of supreme importance for working class folks,
Totally.
for immigrant populations, for folks who are just new to the city in general, that they have options without having to have the expensive car note, and insurance, and everything involved there. And so there's going to be some difficult conversations about land use, about the way we do our built environments. But for that equity piece, for the environmental piece, again, I think everyone in this, I should never say everyone, the vast majority of people in Austin, a super environmentalist city, recognize that our current car dependency is just untenable environmentally, is not what we need to be doing when we're experiencing the impacts of climate change with heat waves, with the winter storms, with things that I grew up in the area that we didn't used to have to deal with the way we're dealing with now. So to me, it's like I get where communities are coming from with things like the home initiative, with things like different land use, minimum lot sizes are about to come up. There's going to be some teeth pulled, but it's what we have to do for our future to build the type of city that can be sustainable, that can exist and outlive all of us.
Can you tell us about sort of your personal journey of how you came to be involved in the community and into advocacy?
Yeah, I'll say a lot of it happened on accident. So I'll have to go back to my undergrad here. So I went to Texas Christian University, and depending on your political alignment, it's a bit of a backwards university. I was part of 3% of, at the time, 3% of black students on campus. And my first few years, I wasn't involved in politics, organizing, advocacy, any of that. It was really around like my mid to late junior year where, started to look around at some of the circumstances that we as black students were facing on campus. Then noticing, okay, we don't have any black studies. None. Didn't exist at TCU. So what that turned into was me and another student eventually co-founding African American Studies as a minor, comparative race and ethnic studies as a department. And that was just the genesis of everything. Because for me, everything that I do today is rooted in that. It's just literally talking to people, making the connection, doing the community organizing. So that turned into me talking to my mentor, one of my professors at the time, and saying, how do I keep doing this work when I graduate? He said, go organize a union. So I went and organized a union in Boston, the one singular year that I've lived outside of Texas. And I came right back. The organizing was great, but Boston is not a city for me personally.
A little cold.
Basically, from there, when I moved back to Austin, I was facing some family circumstances at the time that were kind of like, I need to not do the full-time organizing, but more like 8 to 5 jobs where I could still make an impact, but be able to help out my parents. Sure. It really just kind of led me to focus hyper-locally. What can I do in my neighborhood? What can I do in North Austin? And that kind of created the snowball that went down the hill of me continuing to get more and more involved in now running for Austin City Council.
Right. I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. I guess, where can folks learn more about your campaign if they want to get involved? Feel free to websites, wherever folks can find out more about you.
Should I do a fourth wall break on that?
Yeah, here's your plug.
You can learn more about my campaign at adamforaustin.com. Definitely sign up on the website. I'm actually about to have a page launched on there just to seek input from the community. So anything you think should be different in Austin, put it on there. I want to hear it. I'm going to read through every single one of those. And this is a grassroots campaign. I am a renter. I'm not independently wealthy, so I do need donations, whether that's $5 or the max $4.50. It makes a huge, huge impact. And also, I have to add in a plug for
Yeah,
Transit
you're good.
Tangents. Pete Buttigieg, come on the show.
That's hilarious.
I think
you
depending
go.
on when you'll release this, I might be the first politician
Yeah,
to be
there
on
we
the
go.
show.
There you go. Yeah.
Pete, I want you on very soon.
That's awesome.
amazing.
We'll make sure the links to Adam's website as well as social media are in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this as well. Thank you again so much. We really appreciate it.
Of course, of
And,
course.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
And make sure that you like and subscribe, follow the podcast,
There we go.
support Transit Tangents any way you can.
you heard it from Adam.
If city council doesn't work out, you can join us on the podcast.
I'll come back anytime y'all ask me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm saving that dough. Public transit's where it's at. Watch me go.